Good morning, dearest friends, and welcome. It is Thursday, September 1st, the 5th of Elul. We are studying the entire Talmud, one page, one line at a time. Right now, it's Masechet Shabbat, chapter 19, 132. If we didn't know how to spell Kelev,
to blow the shofar.
If we didn't know how to spell Kelev, we think that today's page in the Talmud is Kelev, Kuf Lamed Beis, but that's probably more Caleb or Kalev. But anyways, Kuf Lamed Beis, that's a wonderful milestone. And it's yet to the chapter that's talking about circumcision, Mila. Yesterday, we probed two possible angles of how we know that circumcision is Doiche Shabbos, that we have a bris, we do the bris even if it's Shabbos. Thus far, our exploration has reflected the halachic fact that it's only done if it's the 8th day. We, in the course of the Talmud's process and debate, the Talmud informs us that there's a strong preference to embrace Rabbi Yochanan's take. Rabbi Yochanan's take was that Bayom Hashmini, the word Bayom emphasizes that we do not push off, we do not defer, but we do the bris on the 8th day. Rabbi Acha Bar Yaakov said it's the word Shemini that makes the point. 8, Dafka 8. We don't go to 9, we don't go do 7. The Talmud was uncomfortable for whatever reason. I told you I would try to look for some deeper explanation. I didn't find a lot. I'm going to be honest, I didn't look a lot because things come up. But what I can tell you is that the commentaries make a reference that it's likely, or it's possible, that Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Acha argue on both words, the effectiveness of Bayom and the effectiveness of Shmini. Rabbi Yochanan says Shmini wouldn't work, and Rabbi Acha says that Yom wouldn't work. So just again, I don't want to get into the specifics just because I didn't read up on it properly or sufficiently, but there is that point. We're now going to find a brisa which supports Rabbi Yochanan, and we're going to continue more analysis of Sukkim, comparing bris and the way that bris is doiche Shabbos to the way bris might be doiche, might push aside soras. It's going to be an interesting conversation, and it's going to be somewhat in the same form of analyzing psukim, analyzing Talmudic statements. So again, it's going to be, I believe at this point already, a familiar pattern. So stay tuned. Just give me another 10 seconds. I beg your pardon. All righty. So again, as we were saying, we're going to continue this discussion about the way bris pushes against or is deferred by other conflicts of interest, if you will, conflicts of mitzvah. So just as Shabbos is a day where you would, if not for the mitzvah of Mila, you would not be allowed to do the act of the cut of the circumcision. Well, we're soon going to discover other similar mitzvahs that also seem to come into conflict with the mitzvah of Mila, and we'll see how the series of how the different priorities interact, and it promises to be an insightful, interesting, and stimulating passage or space in the Gemara. So now, again, Kuf Lamed Beis 132a, soon to be 132b. Here we go. Screen is still being shared, right?
Yes.
Okay. Tanya Kavasei de Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brisa that reflects the take of Rabbi Yochanan. Again, Bayoim Hashmini, underline the word Bayoim. That's how we know it is dafka on the 8th day, even if it is Shabbat. If someone else was trying to say something and I didn't call you, I'm sorry. We always want to hear from everyone, and I try not to, because it's a conversation more than a presentation. So just let me know if you were trying to say something and I didn't notice it. There's a brisa that is like Rabbi Yochanan and rejects Rabbi Acha. And interestingly, this brisa, unlike a Mishnah, which is usually super shorthand, and there's not much room of narrative or dialogue in a Mishnah. I mean, there is occasionally. The brisa is somewhat more elaborate, and it's going to record a thought process. Let's see. It says, Vayoyim Hashmini Yimol. Bisar Arlasai, I believe, is the verse. Shmini Yimol. Afilu b'Shabbos. That would tell me, even on Shabbos. So again, remember, Isha ki tazriya v'yoda zacha v'toma shivas yamim kimei nidas dvaisa titma, 7 days. Uvayoyim hashmini yimol b'sar lasai. So imagine we didn't say uvayoyim hashmini, we would just say shmini yimol. The bris is on the 8th day. Afilu b'Shabbos, okay, even Shabbos, any day. But there's a problem. What's the problem? When it comes to talking about Shabbos, there's a pasuk that says Mechal Aleha Mois Yumas. He who desecrates Shabbos, or she who desecrates Shabbos, Mois Yumas, there is a consequence. Mois Yumas Bishar Melachais Chutz Mimila. How do I read this line? Does it mean every melacha with the exception of Mila? Oi, Einai Alafilu Mila. The Brisa says we have a question. Maybe it even is inclusive of circumcising. Oh, really? Hold on. Circumcising on Shabbos, you might have a consequence, but I've got a conflicting pasuk. Omani Mekayim Shmini Yimol. What the pasuk says, 8th day. But maybe this pasuk means Chutz Mi Shabbos. So basically, we have two psukim that challenge one another. We don't know how they interact. Is the statement of if you do a malacha, one is put to death. Is that the dominant fact? And does that tell us you cannot do circumcision on Shabbos? Or is the Shmini? We have two conflicting values in the Torah. Head-on collision. How do I navigate? The Brisa has an answer, not to worry. Talmud Loimar, for that reason, the pasuk adds the word Bayoim, Afilu b'Shabbos. Shmini alone, Mechala Ma'isumas alone, leave us with tension, with a conflict. We don't know how to resolve it. When the Torah adds an extra word, Bayoim Hashmini, it says, don't be confused. Don't have a doubt. The fact of the matter is, you can do a bris on Shabbos. That's what the Bayoim comes. So you have two equally aligned, equally contrasting or conflicting texts, but you add one more word onto Team Mila, and it's that word that tells us that bris is done even on Shabbos. Now, this brisa opens many questions and leaves a lot of room for conversation. I have good news for you. The Gemara itself is going to spend a good bit of time analyzing this brisa, which really walks us through a certain thought process. It walks us through a certain way of reading the conflicting psukim. Shabbos, bris, which one? So the Gemara is going to discuss it. But here,
Rabbi.
Yes, Sir Beryl.
Something occurred to me. Maybe I'm off base. I'm surprised in all the discussion, nobody questions Yom Kippur. Couldn't somebody say you could Mechal Shabbos, but the Yom Kippur not? Or am I off base?
You're off base in that we haven't yet talked about any other day aside for Shabbos. And so let's even the Gemara that likes to go off on tangents is so far staying focused on Shabbos. So let's.
But I think they actually do a bris on Yom Kippur.
We will talk about it. Yeah, you do bris on Yom Kippur.
I do remember.
We're not there yet. Right now, we're still
kid.
navigating only Shabbos. We're gonna get there, but for now it's only Shabbos. Soon we're gonna talk about Yontif. Rebel, we're gonna open many cans on this journey. Good question. Hold it in mind, and let's see when the Gemara opens that door. Again, ostensibly, this brisa is introduced to us to show us the support of Rabbi Yochanan, a rejection of Rabbi Acha or Rav Acha. How does it support Rabbi Yochanan? It supports Rabbi Yochanan's bottom line. Rabbi Yochanan says the word bayom. Maybe it even explains Rabbi Yochanan. You know why Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say Shmini like Rav Acha does? Because Shmini itself alone isn't strong enough to tell me that it dislodges Shabbos. They're at a standstill. It's the bayom that tips the scale. That's how Rabbi Yochanan learns it. That's how the Brisa says it. So take what I'm going to say in this next line in a parentheses. If it's confusing, avoid it. An interesting exploration will be, are we saying that this Brisa reflects Rabbi Yochanan's thinking? Or are we simply saying that the bottom line is the same? Meaning Rabbi Yochanan says bayom and the Brisa says bayom. So is the Brisa a reflection of the fullness of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion or the bottom line? I'm going to leave that question unanswered for now, but that's something that that in the course of an in-depth study session we might consider. For once. All right, this is the Brisa. Here we have it. Amar Rava. So now Rava launches us into a series of comments, questions, analysis of this Brisa. So again, we have the psukim of the Torah that are analyzed in a Brisa. And the Brisa does a very interesting job giving us like a whole, you could almost hear the voice of the Tana. You could hear the voice of the rabbi whose words are being documented. You hear the tune, you hear the voice. It's much more than just a dry and cut statement of fact. We have a whole shear happening in this Brisa. It happens, but not always. So now we have a Brisa that's analyzing psukim. And now we're going to have the voice of the Talmud, or the sages of the Talmud, analyzing this Brisa that's analyzing the Chumash, the Psukim. So hold on tight. It's not as confusing as I'm making it sound, but I just want you to see the different layers of conversation. All right, Amar Rava. Rava says, Hi Tana, meikara mai konichale, ulibasoif makakashale. The author of our Brisa, initially he makes an assertion, and then he becomes uncertain about it. We're going to read Rabbi Steinsaltz's language, but I just want to show you what I believe Rava is saying. The Brisa, the author of the Brisa, presents his presentation as follows. Shmini yimol afilu b'Shabbos. When I first read the pasuk about bris, I know on the 8th day you do it, no matter what day of the week it is. First, konichale. He has a certain initial take. Then we introduce a question. So there's a question. He has a settled. He starts off with what it sounds like a settled halacha, and then he informs us. The author of the Brisa informs us that there is a question mark.
Rabbi?
Question.
Yes.
I have a question.
Hold on. Professor's going, and then Eli, you'll go. Professor, go ahead.
Previously, there was a long discussion on how we derive that circumcision override Shabbos, whether we derive it from the word 8, we derive it from the word day, doing that not to the night, and so on. And in this Brisa, we see that the Tana skipped the word day. Does it mean that he takes a specific position that its day is not important, or and the 8th is of overriding importance?
Professor. So I want to make sure I understand. You're saying yesterday we had two opinions. One says the word day carries the day, and one
Right.
says the number 8 carries the day.
Right.
Our brisa for the first 7, 8, whatever many lines is only focusing on the word 8,
And Mrs. Day.
but
Oh,
we
it
got to
could
look
have-
at it is the
could have quoted.
but the punchline is day. I probably scanned over it. Look, here's the bottom line. Talmud Lomar, or here, I'll show you in English. The verse states on that day, even on Shabbos. So basically, the punchline is day. The initial thought process is that Shmini would work. The Brisa rejects 8 and takes the word day. So the Brisa, at least in its frame, in its outline, is supporting team day, supporting Rabbi Yochanan. So
Okay.
I spent more time on the question than the answer. So thank you. So again, the Brisa says Shmini should work. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it does work. No, Shmini is not going to work. 8 is not going to work, but they work. So that's the bottom line. That's the punchline of the Brisa. Now, Rava is going to analyze this above text. And I'm going to read it. I want to read it with you in the language of Rabbi Steinsaltz, because I again, this is like an excavation. You know, archaeologists, you dig one layer and it's like from the 1800s, and you dig another layer and it's from, in Israel, you dig one layer and it's from the first Yishuv, and you dig lower, it's from the Ottomans, you dig even lower, and all of a sudden you're in the Second Temple era. And so here we have literally that. We have the Torah. On top of that, we have the Brisa. And then on top of that, we have the Gemara's analysis. The only difference is we're starting with the Pasuk. We're working our way up instead of down. Dr. Hammer?
Is there a difference between saying a bris shall be held on the 8th day?
I'm sorry, you.
Bris shall be held when the newborn is 8 days old. I think there should be, and it's not differentiated, because if you're born, late in the day and have a bris early in the day, you're not 8 days old yet.
I hear you. That's an interesting point. I'll tell you what, the Chumash or Halacha in this context, I don't believe makes that distinction, but it's an interesting point.
It's
Are we
referred
talking
to
about
differently today in terms of if you go back, one says 8 days old, one.
Oh,
but,
yeah. If a baby is not well, and then you go.
No, not well. It doesn't not about that, but it was. I caught it today somehow that there was a difference in.
One might make such a reading, but
Right.
I do not believe that the halachists or the Talmudists who analyze make that point. But here's, I think, another instance where we have to try to really imagine what the Hebrew means, and this is where Dr. Stamler is. Dr. Stamler on? Yeah. This is where we've a few different times already questioned about Yoim and Hashmini, or there's a lot of linguistics involved over here, and it's a good observation. It doesn't look like the Brisa or the Gemara makes that point, but it is an interesting thing to consider. In other words, I'll just to give you a one-liner. In halacha, generally we say miksata yom kikulo. The fraction of a day is a day. This is most famously used in the context of mourning, where although there's Shiva, it's not really Shiva, it's 5 days and 2 fractions. The first day whenever you start and the last day. So apparently in Bris as well, as long as the baby is born on the calendar day, and it's halachically daytime, then it'll be 8. It'll be the 8th day, but not necessarily 8 days old if you count by hours. But anyway, so that's the gist of how we look at it. As for why, let's hold that question. It's a good question. Let's just hold off for another time. Now let's go back to our analysis of the Brisa. Amar Rava. Let's lead it in. With regards to the Brisa, Rava said, initially, what did this Tana find acceptable? Meaning, initially he says, Shmini tells us.
By the way, I just thought of something. For instance, when we talk about Shiva Shavuot, the 7th weeks, it says Shiva Shavuot Mimim. So it actually specifies a full 7 weeks.
So the absence.
So the absence of it shows that we do the same thing also with 6 hours. Some people keep into the 6th hour of between
meat and milk. Yes. Shkoyach, doctor. Very, very, very good and very helpful. Thank you. So again, let's go back. We're reading Rabbi Steinsaltz just because there's a lot of, this is a line of the Gemara that needs a lot of commentary, and let's embrace Rabbi Steinsaltz, and then maybe we'll look at Rashi. Initially, what did this Tana find acceptable? And ultimately, what did he find difficult? Let's read. Initially, the Tana suggested on the 8th day shall be circumcised is a valid source for the fact that circumcision overrides Shabbos, which would be like what Rav Acha says factually. But ultimately, he deemed that difficult and turned to an alternative source. Yet provided no reason, neither for his initial statement nor for his second statement. So the Tana doesn't say, I'm rejecting Shmini because of X. I'm embracing Bayoim because of X. So Rava says, can we get some explanation here? Why was Shmini good at his initial assumption, and why is it ultimately rejected? In Rashi's language, Meikara Ma'inichale, what was initially good for him? I just hit mute all again here. Please unmute yourself if you can, but there was some very terrible static. Shmini Dafka. Why initially was he comfortable with Shmini telling us Vafilu b'Shabbos? Even and it dislodges, it pushes aside the Shabbos. And then when the author of the Brisa reverses himself, what changed his mind? What was his initial question? So basically, we have a Brisa who's basically thinking out loud. That's what Rava seems to be saying. The author of the Brisa is sharing a natural progression of his impression of the laws of bris. Initially, he says, yeah, Shmini works. But hold on, there's a problem. So you know what, maybe not. Actually, yeah, we're going to use a different source. He's like thinking out loud. Which again, I told you, as I said before, we get a very interesting real-time chance to hear the voice of the author of the Brisa. But Rava wants to understand what and why. Here is what's going on. Initially, he reads the pasuk that says, Shmini Yimol, you do it on the 8th day, Afilu b'Shabbos, even if it's Shabbos. Now, how do we deal with the pasuk that says that you really better not desecrate Shabbos or there's a death penalty? We believe that bris could push aside desecrating Shabbos. Why? My timer. Why is circumcision more powerful, more compelling than Shabbos? Kal v'chaymer, I can use the logic of a fortiori inference. I'll use the logic of a kal v'chaymer. What's the logic of kal v'chaymer? Here's where we're going to introduce leprosy. We know that a person is not allowed to serve in the temple if he's a leper. But we do temple service on Shabbos. So let's think about this. We have 3 mitzvahs of 3 different values. We have temple service, we have circumcision, and we have leprosy. Leprosy seems like a very powerful and overriding mitzvah. Leprosy dislodges, doesn't allow a Kohen to work in the Beis HaMikdash. So we know that what's stronger, leprosy or temple service? Leprosy. And the temple service, which is pushed aside for leprosy, pushes aside Shabbos, meaning Shabbos is weaker than temple service. Well, then certainly circumcision should push aside Shabbos. Interesting logic. But basically, if temple service, which is weaker than leprosy, pushes aside Shabbos, then certainly Mila should push aside Shabbos. Bear with me another moment. We'll come back and we'll recap. So this is the initial assumption. The initial assumption is that if we're going to have a lineup of Shabbos versus bris is stronger. Bris has a stronger punch, halachic punch. Bris has the ability to overpower the restrictions of Shabbos. This is his initial assumption based on a complex analysis of the power of tzaras, the power of Shabbos, the power of avodah. If tzaras pushes aside avodah and avodah pushes aside Shabbos, well then Mila for sure should push aside Shabbos because Mila is even stronger than tzaras, as we'll see. Again, I know this might be a little confusing, but let's hold on tight. Shabbos. So this is the initial, the rabbi, the Tana, and the Brisa who first starts off saying, I've got a verse that says Shabbos, Shmini. I've got a verse that says don't. I have a verse that says bris. I have a verse that says Shabbos. Of course, this is initial read. Bris is stronger. And then the rabbi, the Brisa, thinking out loud says, maybe not. Maybe Shabbos is stronger. So we're basically putting a lot of words in the mouth of the rabbi of the Brisa. What does it mean? Hadar Amar, maybe he's thinking. The rabbi of the Brisa, the Tana of the Brisa is thinking out loud. How do I know that truly saras is stronger than leprosy? Maybe Shabbos is actually the stronger value. You know why? Because although in one sense, saras seems to be a very compelling, powerful force, making me think that Shabbos is weaker, maybe Shabbos is actually stronger. You know why? Because the Torah has many different verses telling me not to desecrate Shabbos. Therefore, I can't use saras to prove to me that bris is stronger than Shabbos. Maybe Shabbos is stronger. Inami, or maybe another way of reading it, how do I know that saras is so strong? Maybe the person can't. When it comes to saras, maybe the issue is hold on.
Rabbi.
Hold on. Maybe the person is out of commission, but it doesn't mean that saras is stronger than avoda. It just means the individual has to step out of the avoda. Hold on. I want us to just get the basic sound, and then we'll work through it properly. So now that the rabbi of the Brisa is saying, actually, maybe Shabbos is really stronger than whatever, because we created like a team. We said bris and saras are on the same team. And so if saras beats up Shabbos, then bris beats up Shabbos. But now we said, no, maybe actually Shabbos is stronger. If Shabbos is stronger, well, then it beats down Shmini. Umani Mikayim Shmini Yimol. And now if you're telling me that Shabbos is stronger than bris, then what's the eighth day? Chutz mi Shabbos. Without Shabbos. Talmud Laimar, until the pasuk comes, a knight in shining armor, the white horse. The knight rides in, the word Bayoim, and then punches down, beats down Shabbos and says, no, bris is actually on Shabbos. So what the Gemara just did here is we put a lot of words into the mouth of the author of the Brisa. The Brisa initially thinks that Shabbos is stronger. Eventually he changes his mind and says, all things being equal, initially he thinks bris is stronger. Then he changes his mind and says, all things being equal, Shabbos is stronger, necessitating an added word. That added word reasserts the dominance of Mila and bris can be done on Shabbos. Rabbi Earl, go ahead. I'm sorry, you were asking.
I'm surprised that nobody uses the obvious argument that Shabbos is Aseres Adibros.
Well, the Gemara essentially does that. The word Shahara Yeshba, Asharais, where is it? In the discussion of what's stronger, Shabbos or the other things, Saras, here. Sheken Yeshba, Oinshim, Asharais Harbe. So it doesn't say explicitly Aseres Adibros, but Shabbos has a very, very large, high profile, multiple appearances in the Torah. Its consequences are very, very strict. And therefore, so basically, again, just to add, why would a sage initially think that bris is stronger and then change his mind and say that Shabbos is stronger, only to change his mind once more by reading another pasuk? Where would this be coming from? And so the Gemara puts a lot of words in his mind that it has to do with the introduction of leprosy being either stronger or weaker than temple service. That's how the Gemara explains. That's how the Gemara explains the thought process of this rabbi in the Bryce. Now you're going to tell me Saras, that came totally out of left field. So it seems like the balance of Bris, Saras, and Shabbos is actually common in this scholarly conversation about the strength of different mitzvahs, and therefore it's not entirely unreasonable to introduce this whole thought process and say this is behind the Brysa's reasoning. Folks,
I have a question.
Hold on. Give me one more second. Ellie first, and then Alan. Ellie, go ahead.
So the question is, we're doing the bris on the 8th day. It said from Hashem Torah, do the bris on the 8th day.
Yes.
But wouldn't we be a little bit afraid when it falls on Shabbos that people might carry to come? Like we don't do shofar because people might carry. We don't do this.
Dr. Hammer, hold on. I want Dr. Hammer to give you the answer. Hold on, you're muted. Dr. Hammer, you're muted.
No, we learned that you have to hold the knife out publicly to show your awareness of you're going to do a mitzvah. It's not just carrying. That's one thing.
No, but I remember Dr. Hammer very poetically portraying for us the fact that any person can hold the shofar and blow it, but not any person can administer a circumcision. You have to be highly trained to be a mohel. And so the highly trained mohel is less likely to do something that's not consistent with the regulations of bris on Shabbos than the mitzvah of shofar, which ultimately is something that any person, not really any person, but many people can do. So for example, you could be a person that has a background in music, and you will have the most beautiful sounding shofar, but you might still be interested in seeking out a teacher for advice on how to sound the shofar. And therefore, eventually, and I know we're confused. Ellie, I answered your question because we discussed it. It really introduces a lot of confusion. I'll tell you why. Because biblically... No,
I know the answer to it. It's fine. But I'm saying other people might carry to come to the bris that we could be worried about.
Oh, you're saying... So actually, Ellie, I don't want to fully address this, but it's actually a raging contemporary debate. We know it's super important to do a bris on Shabbos. Super important.
Correct.
Shabbos is doiche mila is doiche Shabbos. But what if I know, let's say I'm a mohel, and I know that if I agree to do the circumcision on Shabbos, 50 people are going to drive to the party.
Correct.
So should the mohel...
What's the level now? What's the level?
So I'm not going to this is a contemporary question with different opinions, but it is an interesting question. Meaning, the question really is like this, Eli. Does the obligation of the father to give the bris on time and the mohel more conceptually with a communal responsibility to help people do the bris, are they considered facilitators of Chilul Shabbos by doing the bris, or they are not? They are doing their obligation. And if another person chooses to drive, that's their own prerogative. I'm not going to give you an answer. I'll just tell you that.
But you know that they're going to drive.
It doesn't matter. Or not. It doesn't matter. It might not matter.
I know. The same question comes in with inviting a couple to a Shabbos meal that you know that are going to come to you and drive to you.
Same but different, but
same exact. It's
not. It's not same exact.
Many Rabbanim.
It's not. I know it's not same exact.
Say you're allowed to do it.
It's not same exact. There's a stronger.
You're allowed to do it if you offer them the option.
If you offer them a place to stay overnight.
But there's a big distinction because by Shabbos, it's actually a bigger question in a way. Are you allowed to positively, proactively tell a person, please come over, knowing they're going to drive on Shabbos? The bris, you're not calling each person and saying, please drive over on Shabbos. You're just saying, hey guys, bris is scheduled for this time. Here's the hotel, do what you want. And so in a way, if you're comfortable inviting, that's like even a bigger chiddush. On the flip side, maybe inviting a person to Shabbos could directly lead to their eventual observance of Shabbos. Whereas people driving to a bris is less likely to have any influence on their broader Shabbos observance. Again,
Rabbi.
Hold on. I just want to be clear. As it pertains to Eli's question about doing a bris on Shabbos if people are Mechal Shabbos, I am not giving an opinion here. There are opinions that say like this and opinions that say like that. Generally speaking, I'm pretty sure, although I did ask the Shaila a few times, the Chabad Rabbanim would say, do the bris on time and discourage people from being Mechal Shabbos. But there are, I think, Sephardic Rabbanim, at least in Florida, there's some Sephardic Mohalim that I think have rabbinic guidance to actually push off a bris until Sunday if a situation of Chil
I'll tell
Shabbos.
you what worries me more. I'm sure that by saying it's Docha Shabbos,
I'm sorry?
I'm sure by saying it's Docha Shabbos and there's no, let's say there's no more help to be that they can't come or willing to come or whatever. I can definitely think of a scenario where some fanatic, because the mitzvah is on the father to do the bris, that some fanatic will say, I'm going to do it on my own because this is such a big deal, and that sometimes could worry me.
Well, I hope as fanatic, as big a fanatic as a person is, I hope they're not going to inflict harm on their own child. And if they are, that's a whole nother level. They should be locked up or lose custody. But that's, we can't decide halacha on the basis that some Meshugana could take it out of context. You have to decide halacha based on what's reasonable and correct.
No, I understand.
Rabbi, unfortunately, in contemporary times, these people are going to drive anyway, whether you invite them or not, for 10 other things.
That's another question. That's another issue.
They're not people that wouldn't drive and only driving because you invited them.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another question, which again, I'm explaining the question, but I'm deferring the answer. Can you say if this person is going to drive to the movies anyways, let me invite them here for coffee on Shabbos? Can you say that? Or it doesn't matter if they're what they're going to do otherwise. Now you're becoming a party to their. Anyways, all right. Let's. Very interesting question. Eli, you get the Barrel Can of Worms Award today.
Okay.
We can go fishing after Shabbos.
Okay.
You left out a very important culinary issue. You can't have fresh bagels on Shabbos. It's a big problem.
And by the way, day-old bagels are not just day-old bagels. Day-old bagels don't deserve to be called bagels at all. And so this is also a problem.
Yeah, big problem.
Yeah, but you can't even have fresh sushi on Shabbos.
Can't fresh.
Yeah.
It's rough. Anyway, okay.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say there for some reason, Minhag America is that a bris is bagels and lox and cream cheese. If the bris doesn't have bagels, lox, and cream cheese, you can't really call it a bris. You can call it, but if you probe the halachic sources about bris, it's a sudas mitzvah, and really it's highly preferred that they should serve meat.
Fleshig.
My daughter-in-law's brother, the bris, everything is done. He was a strama.
In Eretz Yisrael, I believe it's more
6
common.
o'clock in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, you get cholent, you get brisket, you get whatever.
You end your day before you start. Anyways, all right. So again, just Rava asked the question, what was the thought process? And the Gemara gave an elaborate proposed take on what the Tana was thinking, why initially he was inclined to see it one way, and eventually was inclined to see it another way. Just to see Rashi for a moment, Aval Mila Dachia, Shabbos, Bekal V'chomer, the Tigmar Minei, the Midchi Mechala Masyumos, initially we had to call it Chomer one way. Rashi here fills in. I just want to show you a little more. What's the story of leprosy pushing aside Avodah? And what's the story of Mila pushing aside Tzaras? As Hora Sheisira Torah al Tzaras. The Torah has a prohibition against leprosy. What does it mean? Shaloi lakotz b'harasim. A person is not allowed to remove a tzaras. A person in the time of the temple wakes up one day and they have a malady on their skin that's going to cause them to be determined to be a leper. They are not allowed to pluck the hair, pull the skin, cut it off. You're not allowed to do something to remove the evidence of tsaras. Hishomer b'nega hatzaras. The Torah says, guard the tsaras. Azhara b'koitzes b'harasa yakosov medaber. The Torah is giving a severe warning not to remove a leprous spot. V'chmira Torah b'azharazu litchais ha'avoda. Now let's say you're a kohen. You're about to go into the Beis Hamikdash. You're about to do your avoda, and I have a leprous spot. So you might say, I'll just remove it and go to work. The answer is no, you're not allowed to. Basically, you're not allowed to remove your leprous spot to go and proceed in the service of the Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, what we see here is what's stronger, leprosy or avoda. Leprosy is so strong that you're not allowed to remove it in order to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. That's one of the points that we made over here. So avoda chamura hi shadeicha Shabbos. So you do avoda on Shabbos, but you push aside avoda for saras. Mila doicha isa esat saras. So a person has a leprous spot on their foreskin or on their baby's foreskin. So what do? You're not allowed to remove leprosy, but you have a biblical commandment to remove the foreskin, the arla, with the bris. So which one is more strong, saras or mila? Anyone want to take a stab at this? Anyone want to take a chop at this? You have mila versus baheres, leprous spot versus a foreskin that needs to be removed. Which one pushes which aside?
But how could that happen? The child doesn't even have a sense to sin. How could the child have the leprosy?
So hold on. Let's push aside the esoteric or moral or machshava part. Let's ask first a halachic fact. It may never happen, or maybe we're talking about an adult who never got a circumcision. An adult becomes a Baal Teshuvah. He goes to Mayanot. He goes to Or Sameach. He goes to Esha Torah. And they start teaching him about Torah. And he learns that there's a mitzvah called bris. He says, I want to do a bris. They say, okay, go to Rabbi Dr. Kohen, who's a Mohel, and ask him to schedule a bris. He says, okay, I just got to make sure. Let's take a look. He sees the arla. He also sees that he needs a bris, but he notices that there's also a spot that looks like leprosy. So what now is Rabbi Dr. Kohen's advice to the leper? Does he say, first we got to clear up the leprosy, and then we can give you a bris? Or does he say, schedule the bris, stat, and we're going to take care of this leprosy issue? Which one does Rabbi Dr. Kohen?
I vote for the Mila.
Professor Stern.
Yes, because the process of leprosy is so long and involved that uncircumcised person might not even undergo it. It's all for a fully circumcised Jew. At the end, you have to go bring a korban, go to a mikvah. You cannot expect it from a child, or even from an adult who is not circumcised yet.
So Professor Stern is taking a very pragmatic take, which I very much appreciate, which is, if you don't do this bris today, there's no telling what's going to happen. This could be pushed off indefinitely. But I think the essence of his take really is, bris is so important that it should push aside leprosy, particularly because it's not always possible you'll get a package deal. I think that's what the professor's saying. It may not be a package deal. You may end up being compelled to choose one or the other. I'm happy to inform. Hold on, Beryl, yeah.
Also, the bris is time sensitive. The leper, if I remember, he can go today, he can go tomorrow. He doesn't have a specific day when he must show it or whatever.
So the professor and Beryl are taking a similar position. The only difference is that if the leprous spot is on the arla, it's going to. Anyway, the bottom line, because we're running out of time, is that the doctor's assertion is correct, that bris mila is doicha leprosy. So now let's revisit, and we're going to stop in the middle. And I know this was an interesting Gemara today. We have a series of different issues. We have like different, what do you call it? Where you have the bracket kind of, you know what I'm talking about? Right, different sports teams, you have different brackets. Help me out of here, someone. Well, anyways, we have these different
ranking.
So we have different mitzvah rankings, and we're using this to get into the mind of the rabbi of the brisa. We have a face, how do you call it? We have Shabbos temple service. Which one is stronger? Answer, Shabbos. We have Tzaras temple service. Which is stronger? Answer, Tzaras. We have circumcision and leprosy. Which one is stronger? Circumcision. So circumcision beats Tzaras, leprosy. Leprosy beats Avodah. Shabbos beats Avodah.
Avodah beats Shabbos because you do the.
I'm sorry, Avodah. No, Shabbos beats Avodah. But being that leprosy beats Avodah, and bris beats leprosy. So now bris is on the top of the food chain. Bris being so strong that it should be doicha. I'm simplifying. I'm taking a little bit out of the Kal V'chomer, but basically,
it only doichas a Saras and Avodah, but it doesn't doicha Shabbos. You said Shabbos.
No. The question is, does bris doicha Shabbos? That's the question.
Right. But if Avodah,
by establishing bris at the top of the ranking and Shabbos somewhere in the midpoint, it's reasonable to assume that if we're going to align Shabbos and circumcision is going to win the day. That is the initial thought process of the rabbi of the Bryce. Then suddenly the ranking of Shabbos gets a massive boost. And Mark, I think that was your question, really, or that's where all of a sudden, out of the blue, Shabbos gets a massive boost. Set aside the different rankings. Shabbos is massive. Shabbos has greater consequences than all other mitzvahs. And so many mentions that the rabbi, the Tana of the Mishnah, is no longer confident that in a one-on-one ranking, bris will overcome Shabbos. He's therefore now inclined to say maybe Shabbos is stronger, and you push the bris aside. And the only way the Tana will reassert the dominance, the only way the Tana will now once again place Mila on the top of the ranking is an explicit additional biblical word. And that's why Bayom rides in to save the day and to elevate Mila to the top ranking. Again, in the Brisa, the Tana starts off thinking Mila is stronger. He ends up being doubtful, needing another word. What's his thought process? The Gemara answers. Initially, based on an elaborate ranking, he was clear that bris comes out on top. But then looking at it from a different angle, maybe Mila is not at the top of the ranking, warranting an additional pasuk, which clearly sets aside, clearly highlights that bris actually indeed pushes aside Shabbos. This is a somewhat simplified version of today's
Rabbi.
Gemara. Yes, Rabbi.
It sounds very good, except you have Bayom and Shabbos all over. Which day it is Shabbos is? You have Bayom again.
Every time the Torah uses Bayom and a number, and it is not, and it follows a previously clarified series of dates, and therefore the Bayom is extra. The Torah, the Gemara is going to tell us the Bayom is therefore a limud. We already had a taste of this yesterday in the context of Karbanot. And anywhere else that we're going to have this same pattern, we're going to have a similar discussion, and it's going to be there to teach us a halacha. For today, the Brisa, reflecting Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, Bayom is extra to tell us bris pushes aside Shabbos. This unfortunately concludes today's Gemara. We spent a long time, I hope, I hope my extra words and explanation were more helpful than confusing. Tomorrow, we're going to spend a little time really drilling down into the lineup between circumcision and leprosy. We're going to really try to understand the professor's point that he made, and Rebberal affirmed that leprosy can be removed in the face of Mila, and that's going to be at least the first part of tomorrow's discussion. And eventually, we're going to get back to a more familiar pattern, but for now, we're going to spend a little more time looking into the psukim and digging into the rationale behind leprosy and the prohibition to move it and Shabbos. That concludes the formal part of today's Talmud discussion. Thank you so much for joining today.
Can I just add something?
Yes, Alan, now please go ahead.
Okay. The
Alan first.
Once the psoras appears on a baby and you remove it, God put it there. So if you do the Mila and you remove it, it'll reappear anyways.
Tomorrow, Alan, I hope you can join us tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to talk much more about that question. Today, it came up in passing to help us understand the ranking question. Tomorrow, we're going to hone in on that. And so, although the primary discussion will not focus on the esoteric, spiritual, or kavana behind Zaras, Bli Neder will address it to some extent. And I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for joining us today on the 5th of Elul. Looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow, Erev Shabbos. And we'll continue this discussion. A big Yasher Koyach. Wishing everyone a wonderful, healthy, prosperous, happy, nachas-filled day.
Man, thank you.
Eli, go ahead.
No, I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Eli,
Yasher Koach.
you're going to join us in New York? You're going to come to the OHEL to 770?
Yes, I wanted to tell everybody, I'm sorry, I'm doing a car wash, so it's kind of loud over here. So I wanted to, it was not official. The rabbi gave me the go-ahead yesterday. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's Sunday, October 2nd. We're doing the Sept Torah for my father and Shalom in my house, going to the shul.
Beautiful.
So I'll send invitations in the chat. If anyone's here in
That's
town,
It's very special, Ali. So good, you'll share more information in the coming days. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, have a good day.
Yasher Koach.